Oh, your mic slipped.
Yes, just slipped down. Yes.
All right, we'll try that again. Now everyone can hear me. All right. I've got a poll for everyone. First question, how many of you have a primarily sales-led motion at your company? So almost all of your business is through sales. Yeah, raise your hands. All right, not that many. How many of you have primarily a product-led motion? Almost all of your business is through the product. About the same number. How many of you have both? I feel like some people are not raising their hands. Okay, but it was about even, so I'll go with that. A lot of companies right now are using hybrid motions, and even if they're primarily one or the other, they probably have some element of it. If you think about Atlassian, for instance, they're famous for their product-led motion, but even they have a sales team. They don't call it a sales team. I think it's called something else. But when a company gets big enough, they sometimes want to talk to someone, and they have a sales team that will talk to them. And regardless of whether you started product-led, you started sales-led, you're probably moving and changing your models over time. I've been at companies that have started sales-led and then moved to product-led. I've been at companies that started product-led and moved to sales-led and then had to readjust back to product-led because we focused too much on sales-led. And regardless of how you started, what phase you're in, you are probably thinking about being more product-led. Most companies are. And so you probably are aware that when you do that, it often causes conflict with the sales team. So question is, how do you do that? And how do you get sales and PLG to work better together? And that's what I'm going to talk about. So before I dive in, I want to make sure that we are speaking the same language. Product-led growth is a pretty broad term. It's used a lot of different ways. It's misused at my company all the time. And so it basically encompasses a whole range of activities throughout the entire customer lifecycle. So it includes allowing prospects to try the product. It includes allowing them to buy the product on their own. It includes enabling existing customers to try capabilities that they may not have in their plans. It may include allowing them to then purchase those capabilities on their own. It even could include things like engaging or re-engaging disengaged customers. There's all sorts of things that you can use your product to do to grow your business. And that's really all it means, is using your product to grow your business. It doesn't have to mean self-service purchase. There are models out there. Open source is a good example, where basically you sign up for a free thing, you use it, and then one day if you decide you need more from the company, you talk to their sales team. But today I'm going to focus on that situation where you allow your prospects to try your product and to buy your product on their own. Because that's the thing that inevitably causes conflicts with sales. So that's where we're going to focus today. All right, so caveat. I don't know all the things to reduce every conflict with sales. It's probably never going to happen. In a lot of ways, conflict is natural. I think about the relationship between product and engineering, right? We all work really hard at that relationship. It still has conflict, but you can still treat each other as partners, and you can reduce as much of that conflict as possible. So the same thing with product-led and sales-led growth. Given that the goal of both motions is to grow your business, you have the same goal, you should be able to work together. And when you can't, too much conflict is detrimental, right? It's just not good for the business. So, and also what you don't want to have happen is if you are working on a fledgling PLG motion, you don't want it squashed by sales, right? So you want to be able to start it, grow it, and reduce that sort of conflict. So let me talk a bit now about the nature of this conflict, and then we'll get to how you can reduce it and have two successful motions that complement each other. All right, so let's start with what does PLG do for the business? First of all, and this is a little bit of a commercial, I love product-led growth. I think everyone should be doing it. It allows you to cast a wider net. If you're only serving customers through direct interaction, you're going to miss out on the people who don't want to talk to someone. Probably there's some of you in the audience. Let me actually ask another poll. How many of you like to try products and not talk to anyone before you've tried it on your own first? There I get a lot of hands, okay? I agree. You're also going to miss out on the people you just can't reach, because no matter what happens, your sales team is finite. They can only talk to so many people. So your PLG motion, your ability to try and buy things, it's infinite. There's no limit to it, right? There's no limit to how many people, how many prospects you can talk to. It also allows you to serve smaller customers profitably. If you started as a sales-led motion, there probably was kind of a minimum deal size that you would do, right? It's just natural because it's taking sales time. You have to work on a contract. There's cost associated with it. With PLG, you can lower that minimum deal size, and you can do so profitably. PLG is an amazing forcing function for having a more usable product. And that helps every customer, whether they want to first talk to your sales team or they want to try your product on your own. Every customer benefits from a more usable product. And it's also great at catching some big fishes. So the people that want to try products on their own, this whole room of people who wants to try products on their own, not all of you work at small companies. Some of you work at big companies. So the people that want to try things on their own are just as evenly distributed across the size of company. And when you do all of this, and I want to mention too, like there are many companies that have disrupted others by having this motion. So think about a company like Slack. PagerDuty did this, a company I was at before Heap. We started as a PLG motion and we were able to disrupt the market because engineers, even more than product people, do not want to talk to anyone before they try something. And they would try things on their own. And then that would create opportunities for a salesperson to then go in later and say, hey, you've got 5 accounts. Do you want to talk about something bigger? So all of these things that PLG is so good for your business, they contribute to lower cost of acquisition, so lower CAC, better retention, faster growth, higher profit. It's good for your business. But I probably don't need to convince anyone of that here. On the flip side, the bottoms-up motion, especially for bigger customers, this is a long game, right? You let someone land small, and then over time they grow. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't optimize for that initial land size, right? So a salesperson is always going to try to optimize for that initial land size. I'm looking at you, Ian, runs our sales team here. But PLG doesn't do that. Doesn't care how big you land, just wants you to land, right? And so there's the nature of the conflict, right? If the sales team talked to that customer that bought on their own, they may have convinced them to pay twice as much. They may have convinced them to buy a higher plan. And that may be okay. I mean, that may be a good thing, right? But then what happens if you don't have that motion is that you're missing out on all these customers that would have not done that. So that's kind of the nature of why there's this conflict. Now, that is not the only conflict that happens. All sorts of other conflicts can happen. Most of the other conflicts, though, are based on how you're organized, what your structure is, and due to a change. Like every time you make a change, you're going to have a conflict. So for instance, and we did this at Heap, like let's say you launch a self-service motion. Well, if you're not careful, that may look like a bunch of deals that the commercial team used to be able to work and now they can't, right? If you are coming from a sales-led and going to product-led, you may never have had transparent pricing. Lack of transparent pricing gives the sales team a lot of flexibility, right or wrong. It does. When you have PLG, you can't do it unless people know how much they're going to pay. You need transparent pricing, right? So it removes that flexibility. So there's a lot of good, but there is a very natural reason why it causes that conflict. All right, so what do you do about it? there's a lot of things you can do. I'm going to talk about 3 specific tactics that you can use if you're moving from being sales-led to product-led or expanding your product-led motions to reduce that conflict with sales. First of all, I should just say talking to them is a good place to start, right? Keeping them in the loop. But other than that, what are the things that you can do? So one of the levers, pricing and packaging. I think this is maybe the most underutilized lever in the business in general. But one of the things you can use it to do is to reduce channel conflict with the sales team. I'll get to how in a bit. The second thing is send leads. So as I was talking to you earlier, sure, PLG is about self-service, but it's also about finding opportunities for growth. And they don't need to be served self-service. They could be served by the sales team. So finding those leads and sending them to sales for cross-sell, upsell, whatever. And then lastly, aligning around the data. Data is always king. Of course, I work at HEAP. I have to say that, but I believe it too. That, the data is the truth. And so if you can align with the organization around what's best for the company, then you can partner better with sales. All right, so I'm going to start with the pricing and the packaging. There are many ways, as I said, that you can use pricing and packaging as a lever. And what you do depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to talk about one example here. But let's say you started as a sales-led org, and you're now adding a product-led motion. And it includes self-serve purchase. So one of the things you need, as I mentioned earlier, is pricing transparency. You can't do it without pricing transparency. The other thing that you typically need to do is you need to have a smaller land package. As I mentioned earlier, there's a minimum that a sales team will deal with, but when it's self-service, there's no cost of sales. You can infinitely serve as many customers as you want, and so you probably want a lower get-in price for people who are going to self-service. The other piece of that is, of course, people are putting things on their credit card. They may be a little bit less willing to put a $20,000 price tag on their credit card, but $3K, a couple $100 a month, that's totally fine. So you create these lower priced offers that are transparent. Well, if you're not careful, this can introduce a lot of sales conflict. Deals that they used to be able to close earlier for higher amounts are now closing at lower amounts. You're getting way more of them if things are going right, but from the sales point of view, that's a loss, right? So it can feel to them like their pie is shrinking. So to solve this conflict, you could build an entirely different product. Some companies did that, right? So like Mongo is an example. They had this big database product. It was on-prem. They built a SaaS product that was self-service. So that's how they did that, completely different product. That's a lot of work. I would not recommend it unless your existing product is really not suited for self-service. A better way to do it is through pricing and packaging. So I'll illustrate that concept here. This is probably the standard pricing concept that you all know and love, good, better, best. It's the most commonly used pricing concept out there for SaaS. And what you can do first, because you need this lower priced offer, is you can assume that your current low priced offer is the better, and then create a good. Create something that's less functional in some ways. It still needs to be a fully functional product, but has less capabilities, less bells and whistles, and has a lower price. You could then, for instance, to reduce some of this channel conflict, make a rule that you only self-serve that good package. Now, I'm not saying that this is the ideal end game, right? So I think that over time, you want to self-serve more and more things and make your product more self-service. But it may be a good place to start, right, when you're first doing this. And so it can help reduce the conflict with sales in a couple different ways. So one is it can replace those more numerous leads, like those leads from companies that are now self-serving, with better high-value leads, right? So what essentially happens is, let's imagine that you are a self-service customer and you're coming in and you're trying the product on your own and you're seeing all of the capabilities that are there. And you are now deciding on a package. You know which package has which capabilities and you want one of the higher packages. That is a really good lead that you can send to sales, right? That's someone who's tried your product, who has gone to the paywall, and who has clicked on one of the higher packages saying, I want this thing that you can't self-serve. I was talking to one of our sales reps last night, and she was going through a couple of different deals she was working and where they had come from. And I said, you know, do you ever get any of this type of lead? Like, I know there's a lead we generate where someone comes in and hits our paywall, they've gone through the trial, and they click on one of the higher packages that they can't self-serve. And she says to me immediately, enterprise upgrade request. I love enterprise upgrade request. I never even named what the lead type was. It's actually a misnomer name. We don't have any enterprise plan. I don't know why we call it that, but I described it. She immediately knew what it was because she knew that those leads convert at least about 50%. They're a much better, stronger lead than anything else that we have. All right, so let's talk about, the other thing I want to mention here is that the way you could do this also is you could let self-service customers land, but then give sales another run at it. So a lot of times companies say, hey, if it's self-service lands, then it has to go to your AM team, right? Your expansion team. I would say let your land team still work on it. A lot of times what I see, and I see this at Heap, I saw it at PagerDuty, is that once someone has gotten into your product and even bought a small amount of your product and used it for a couple months, they really see the value of it. And you see a lot of customers, even after a couple months, wanting to expand. And so when you're easing into this PLG, another way to do it is say your sales reps are allowed to talk to those customers that landed small, especially a couple months in. They may be a lot more willing to talk to you because they see the value when they started they didn't want to. All right, so as a summary here, you can leverage pricing and packaging to land more, which creates more opportunities for big parts of your organization, right? But that doesn't help the commercial team so much, right? You'll get a lot more lands with these smaller customers, great for a bigger company or big enterprises, but it's not as good for the commercial team because they just look at the immediate and what they've lost. So for the commercial team, you provide them much more qualified leads than they were getting before, maybe less, but they convert much higher. And then you give them opportunities to work with those new self-service lands. All right. Sending leads. So I talked a bit about this already. And this is often sometimes referred to as product-led sales. So the idea is that you are using product information to send a lead to sales. Any day of the week, a PQL is a better lead than an MQL on average. So someone that's come to your website, looked at some of your content, downloaded it. I'm not saying it's a bad lead, but someone who tried your product and used it and got value is always a better lead. So create more PQLs. I talked about a couple PQLs already, but you can create a lot more of them in your product than just what's happening during the trial and whether people are hitting a paywall. Some examples. When you sign up for that lower plan, every single one of your capabilities should be obvious that you don't have access to, right? So this is all about the experience. It's all about UI, UX, but you should be able to see the things that you don't have and you should be able to try them. However, you're gonna have people try them. Maybe you let them try them for a period of time, maybe you give them limited access, whatever it is, make sure that your users know what they don't have and that they can try it and see if they want it. You can create a lot of PQLs that way. And feature gating is all about the experience. And one thing that's really important about this is that make sure your whole product team and your UX team understand your pricing and understand this is how you're doing things, because every single new thing that they launch, they have to think about this. They have to think about the experience based on what commercial plan that they have. And then lastly, I mentioned this a bit before, but over-communicate everything. If you're sending PQLs to sales, let them know what they are, let them know what they mean. The rep that I talked to clearly figured it out. Hey, when I get one of these, this is really good. But that takes time. So make sure that they know what is generating these leads and that they're really valuable leads, they're gonna convert better. All right, so talking about that, the things that convert better, that gets into the third point, which is aligning around the data. Aligning around the data is, I've talked a lot about making sure that you can align with the sales reps, that they know that they're getting better leads, they feel like nothing's being taken away from them, but a big part of this is also aligning with sales leadership, and data is great for that. So there's a couple of metrics I think are really important for PLG motions, and especially when thinking about that versus sales motions. One of them is PQLs and PQL conversion, right? So again, getting back to a PQL is on average better than an MQL any day of the week. You can show that with data. You're generating more leads, more opportunities, more revenue from a PQL. Second thing, velocity. So don't forget about velocity. One of the values of these self-service lands is that their velocity is essentially zero. Takes no time, no effort from anyone, right? So when you're comparing that to, or looking at your cost of acquisition, that's a really important metric to look at. What is the average velocity of a deal that you don't self-serve versus you do? Expansion. So I mentioned that earlier, but this is huge. Heap launched our self-service payment option about a year ago. And within that time, we have expanded about 15% on top of that revenue. And if you think about the fact that it's only been a year, so on average, the customer's only there for 6 months, it's really like 30%. We didn't even try. That was without us putting much effort into it. So you have to look at, when you have these self-service lands, because they're small, how are they expanding? That helps you with your business case. And then also pay attention to churn. So one thing about churn is with these small customers, they can obviously be a lot higher, but I would say compare churn to your small commercial deals, and it's probably gonna be about the same and not much worse. And then lastly, if you can't agree on things, run experiments, right? That solves all problems in the end. If you don't know if one thing is better than the other, try it, and then the data wins the day. All right, so as a wrap up, 3 things that you can do, and there's many more as well, but leverage pricing and packaging to try to reduce the channel conflict and bifurcate who's doing what, at least at the beginning. Send sales leads, and you should do this anyway. If you can use your product to generate leads for sales when they do actions that indicate opportunity for upsell, you should do it anyway. And then lastly, align around the data. There are a lot of things I did not talk about today. There's many more challenges with doing this. You have to think about how you're organizing, who owns the revenue number for PLG, how do you align goals across the organizations, operationalization. One of the things I saw when we started generating a lot of PQLs and sending them to the sales team is that our systems did not understand PQLs very well. They were designed for MQLs. So a lot of them just never made it. Some of them were not well understood by the team and they didn't do anything with them. So there's a lot of operational things that you have to think about when you're doing this. Stuff is not easy. And then lastly, I'll leave everyone with, if you aren't thinking about this, how to make your product more self-service, your competitor is. So I often think about how do we leverage self-service to get into a new market? How do we leverage self-service to enter or attract new customers that we're not attracting right now. Companies that can leverage both sales-led and product-led motions are going to excel, at least until the whole world figures out how to not have sales at all. I know my sales team in the room is going to love that I said that. All right, but in the meantime, you have to do the things that will make you friends. Thanks, everyone. If you have questions, I'll hang out for a bit, and I'll also be at the HEAP booth this afternoon.